Firstly, I would like to introduce Rhonda Cunningham and Sarah Nutt, who are the ASL interpreters on the call today. Thank you both. Additionally, I'm excited to introduce our trainer. Dr. Diane Knudsen is an artist and educator. She designs and develops online courses and performance support products for 8,400 adult conservation professionals. She is an instructional systems specialist for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Diane teleworks from her home in South Dakota. She returns to the National Conservation Training Center in Shepherdstown, West Virginia, several times a year to teach. Diane has a doctorate in instructional technology and distance education. She is also a Moodler with the Moodle Educator certification. With that, Diane, it's all yours.
Great. Thank you, Aisha. Welcome, everyone. I'm so happy to be here today to talk with you about communicating visually. In just 55 minutes, you're going to discover how to connect with your audience, and I'll give you some design tools, and you'll figure out how to tell the story of your data, and you'll learn how to communicate a different way, which is visually. And just before I get started, I want to let you know that I approached this presentation a little bit differently. What I will be sharing with you is actually an online course. It was created in Articulate Rise, and you will have access to it after the presentation, but there are no PowerPoint slides. So it'll look a little bit differently than different than you're used to. So with all of that said, let's get going. So first of all, what I'd like to do is get to know you just a little bit better and ask which of these numbers best describe you. Number one, I am a scientist. I have data. I know what it means, but I have difficulty explaining it to others. Number two, I am a statistician. I have data. I think the numbers speak for themselves. Number three, I am a biologist. I have data. I collected it in the field. It's clear to me, but confusing to others. Number four, I am a subject matter expert. I have data. I don't know how to make it easier for others to understand. Number five, all of the above describe me. How did you know? Now I'd like you to take a minute and type your name, or you don't have to type your name because it'll show above the number, but what number are you? And if you're not any of the numbers, feel free to make one up and explain to me what it means. So it looks like we've got lots of fours there. Some twos. I bow down before you. I'm not very talented numerically. Number three, a biologist. Okay. Great. See a lot of fours though. Oh, and a one. Okay. This is exciting. All right, thank you, everyone. I have to collect data and place it in plain language for others. Oh, that's a worthy endeavor as well. Thank you. All right, thank you for participating. And Aisha introduced me already. This is who I am. And that's a picture of me in my garden. So what you'll need today, you'll just need some kind of recording device, paper and pen, computer, iPad, phone, whatever you like, because I will ask you some questions and I will ask you to write a few things down or record them. So what we'll do today, here's our process at a glance. The first thing we'll do to tell the story of your data is to identify your target audience. Then next we'll look and find your story in the data, and that'll make more sense in a little bit. Then we'll create your design, we'll visualize your data, and finally tell your story. And that seems like a lot in the time allotted, and it kind of is, but I'm sure that we can get through it together. So the first step to telling the story of your data is to identify your target audience. And the reason that you need to do that is the more you know about your target audience, the more you can customize your presentation to meet their needs and their expectations. If you don't know anything about them, it will be hard to keep their attention and keep them engaged. So before you develop your data story, it can be a good practice to develop what we call a learner persona. And your learner persona is something that you keep in mind as you work on your presentation. And we'll look at 2 samples next. So as I mentioned before, knowing your target audience can help you tailor your presentation to meet their needs. And as I promised, a learner persona is just an example person from your target audience. It can be based on somebody real, or it can be based on somebody completely fictitious. But it's kind of, if you're a writer, it's kind of the same idea as a character sketch, where you know something about a specific character. So this first one, this is her avatar is named Maria. Her actual name is Satin, and she's a biologist. And these are some information about her. The second one is courtesy of my supervisor, Dan. It's actually his mom. Her name's Yvonne, and this is some information about her. And Yvonne is a member of a target audience that shares these characteristics. It's a group of people who want to volunteer in our national wildlife refuges. So that's some information about them at a glance. So let me ask you this. Have you created a learner persona before? And if you did you find it useful? Could you please answer for me in the chat? Or if you'd like to unmute your mic and turn your camera on briefly, you're welcome to share your experience with the group. See a couple of no's? No? Okay. Okay, it's perfectly fine. It's a new tool, and you might find it useful. So how do you learn more about your audience? There is a presenter and author. Her name is Nancy Duarte. You may have heard of her. I see we got a yes. Good. Knowledge of the audience. Okay, yeah, it's the same thing. Thank you. So Nancy Duarte suggests asking your audience these questions, this list of 6 questions. The main thing is, one characteristic that all audiences have is they want to know what you can do for them. So the next step in the process is to actually find your story. So what do you tell your target audience? And a good place to start is with the word story. Story comes in many, many forms, and it depends on your background and your previous experience of what you think of when somebody says story. So to think about story, how long is a story? Is it something that you hear? Is it something that you read? Does it have characters? What happens in it? Is it fictional? Is it real? Is it personal? Not all stories are long or literary. And this is actually a Wordle piece of art that's created with some different types of stories. So your audience and the purpose will determine the type of story that you choose and how you choose to tell it. Was anyone in attendance today? Did you go to my CDC on You Are the Hero, Tell Your Story? If you did, there were 2 sessions on that, and we talked about using storytelling at work. So these are some examples, because I know adult learners like to learn from examples, and so do I. So Let's take a look at the first one. You're a leader and your organization is going through big change and you want to tell a story to share your vision. That's one kind of story. You're a mentor. You want to get to know your new mentee, so you tell your new mentee a personal story about somebody whom you admire. Third one, you are an experienced employee and you're charged with onboarding a new employee. So you might share a personal story about your work experience. And finally, you're a team member and you have data and you're explaining what your data means to your team. And you want to get data visualization to go with it. And that's who we're going to focus on today, is a team member who needs to tell a data story. So how do you tell a story with data? As I think I mentioned early before we officially got started, I don't do numbers really well. I love words, I love pictures, but I am math phobic and numerically challenged. So when I first started talking to Aisha about this presentation, it was hard for me to imagine how you could tell a story with data until I found an article by the name of a gentleman by the name of Chad Skelton. Said, if you think of telling a story with data, that it's more like a journalism story. How many of you online on this session have written in journalistic style before, with the inverted pyramid and the who, what, when, where, why type of thing? Yes, I see two. Okay, great. That's a way that you can tell the story of your data. It's about identifying a problem, the circumstances around it, and what happened. And you illustrate your data with charts, diagrams, pictures, all of those types of things. And in the end, you have one message that you want the audience to either do themselves or you want them to influence a decision maker. So the purpose of your story is to either persuade your audience to act on something themselves or to make a decision or to influence decision makers. So next we'll look at the parts of your story. We'll do what my coworker Jack calls deconstructing it and look at the story parts. So you have your data worksheets, you have pages of analysis, you have a short brief explaining what you learned, but what you really want is a memorable story and visuals in a clear, pleasing design to share with your audience. So here's some suggestions on how you can develop the story of your data. So first of all, you need to identify the parts of your story. The most important part is your message, and that's the message for your audience. It's the one thing that you want them to act on or remember. And the heading on every page of your slides should tell them at a glance what they need to know or what you want them to do. Then you need to give them some background context. You know, where are you? Are you in government? Are you in a nonprofit, in business? And what's the setting? Who are the characters? What's the conflict? Is there a problem to solve? And the resolution, that's where your data comes in, because your data can offer solutions or a resolution to the conflict. So how do you decide to put what format, or what do you, let me try that again. How do you decide what format to put it in? We'll discuss that more at length later. But as far as making the story of your data memorable, Nancy Duarte gives 3 techniques that you can use to help audiences remember the story of your data. And the first one she calls humanize the characters. And what she means by that is, who are the real people behind the data? Is it you? Is it one of your coworkers? Describe their part in the story. You know, what did they go through? What's the conflict? That type of thing. People are always interested in hearing stories about other people. The second way is to do what she calls marvel at the magnitude. And by doing that, that's if, let's say you have a concept or something that's difficult to imagine or get your head around. If you can give something concrete, like, let's say, I'm just making something up here. Let's say that my coworker Roxanne created enough podcasts in the last year to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool. That's kind of ridiculous, but you know, you get the message. It's pairing a concept with a visual object. And finally, she said to understand the data's emotional arc. What does that mean? Well, if you're in business and your data is going up, that's a happy thing, right? And so you need to understand that and incorporate it in your story. If you're in business and your data is going down, maybe that's not quite as a happy of a thing, but it depends on how you frame it. So now I'd like you to take a couple of minutes and record in your notes. You can share in the chat window if you like. How would you make the story of your data memorable? And we'll have just about 2 minutes for this. And it's putting everybody on the spot in the afternoon. How would you make the story of your data memorable? Jasmine says, connect to a current historical important event. Yeah, that's a great idea. Any others? Something that people can relate to. That's one of the principles of adult learning. Thank you for that, Jasmine. Suzanne says, use a universal concept to create an emotional connection. Good, yeah. Facts, impact of the decision on the ability to make payroll. Oh yeah, getting paid. That's a universal. Share the impact to a real life person, household based on money received from a federal grant. Okay. Color, Rebecca says, yeah, all very good ideas. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing those. So now we are going to, we're finding our story. The next step is to actually see your story. So think about how you told stories when you were a kid. How did you see it? You probably made a lot of little cartoon drawings. Again, Nancy Duarte says that sketching is the magical part of the process. That's when you take rough ideas and make sketches of them and fine tune and refine them till you can lay them out and see the story of your data. So these are some examples. You can draw out your story. You can be as limited or as elaborate as you choose. You might also hear sketching referred to as wireframing when you're talking about laying out the space on a screen. And this is an example of wireframing, this elephants, this elements of design, sorry, infographic. I don't know where I got elephants. Okay. So once you have the rough sketch of your overall story, then you can start thinking about what imagery you'll use to support it. And you can help, this is from a webinar that I went to, it was probably about a month and a half ago, and it was called The Presentation Company, and it was started by two sisters, and they talk about using storytelling in business settings. And they suggest that you can help your audience see the story by using large text and full screen pictures. And you can also introduce your characters by either using photos or video clips. So here's some examples. This is a rough sketch of a presentation for, I mentor some employees who are studying instructional design. And you see, it's really simple. My handwriting isn't the best, but it's just an overview of the story, and then some rough sketches as far as visualizing the data. You know, not everything works. I tried this flower timeline and didn't work with the fire idea. Here's another one, emphasizing a figure that there would be 32.6 million remote workers by 2025. And finally, here's some sketches of what the slides themselves could look like. So how do you choose the format to visualize your data? There's another author, his name is Dave Parody, and he wrote a book on data visualization with using PowerPoint. And he suggests that the language that you use can suggest the format. For example, geographic suggests a map, flow suggests a flow chart. And I'd like a volunteer to help me do this exercise. It's a matching exercise, and you don't get feedback until you're finished. Oh, Glorina, I didn't see your chat. Connect to important details, facts, and events for an emotional connection. Yeah, that's great. So do I have a volunteer to do the matching? Yay. Aisha, do you see anyone?
Not yet. I'm looking at the chat, seeing if anyone raises their hands. It's pretty fun. I did it with Diane when we were practicing. I enjoyed it.
Anyone brave and want to try? Oh,
All
yay,
right,
Jasmine. Thank you. So what data visualization matches with what word? You have here, let me give you one. Share a portion of this is pie chart.
So would timeline, would that fit into a Gantt chart or a timeline?
Yep, let's see. You don't get feedback until the very end, Jasmine.
Okay. Would
That's part of the fun.
demonstration, oh, yes, ma'am. Would demonstration fit into video clip or series of photos?
Okay.
Okay. Would trend fit into a diagram of photos? Would options fit into a decision tree?
Okay.
And I guess the last one goes to assemble, disassemble into graph.
Okay. Let's give it a try. Oh, you actually had these two reversed.
Oh, okay.
But it was a hard one, and thank you for volunteering.
Okay.
So there's another author, his name is Dan Roan, and he wrote a book called The Back of a Napkin. And he suggests that the type of visual that you use depends on the question that you want to answer. Remember earlier I said something about that a story, telling a story with data is like a journalistic story. So if you want to ask who or what, let me see if I can make this bigger. Not really? Okay. If you ask who or what, that's a good case to use a picture or a portrait, he says here. How much, you can use a chart, where is a map, when is a timeline, how could be a flow chart, and why is actually the only one I haven't used before, a multiple variable plot. So then you should storyboard your content. And Nancy Duarte suggests again that you should build your screen so that your audience can see in each slide and get your message in just 3 seconds. So these are some tips that she offers that you can do that. The first one is to streamline all your content so your text supports the story of your data. Now, a lot of you, I remember, were subject matter experts, and this can be really hard. I'll use myself as an example. I have a little interlude on graphic design. I love graphic design, and I originally had 3 other modules about it, but it didn't relate directly to the learning objectives, so I cut them all out. But streamlining your content can be the most difficult because you think everything is important. Excuse me, sorry about that. Next is to write an outline, a script, and a story, and then storyboard it out. What I mean by that is to plan out what goes on each screen. You can use Microsoft Word, you can use drawing paper, you can use PowerPoint. That's what our shop does. Each slide should have a unique individual descriptive title. Each slide should have one clear idea or key point. And then you would go through and insert your data visualization ideas. If you don't have them already made, then just include descriptions or sketches. Oh. So now we interrupt this program on the behalf of design. This is what I was mentioning a minute ago. This is your crash micro course in design. And this is the absolute minimum about design you need to know as a presenter. And there are 4 items. We just did this, what visual format should you use? So I won't go over that again. Here's an acronym for you, CARP, fish, CARP. There are 4 what I call big principles of design. There are many, many more than 4, but there are 4 that I've chosen. And the first one is contrast. When you use contrast, that will draw attention to whatever you have on the screen. You can contrast it with size, either big or small, or with color, or with different fonts. The next one is alignment. When you use alignment in your screen, it streamlines your layout and gives it a more orderly appearance. Adobe says that if you're ever looking at your screen and something feels a little bit off, then look at your alignment. If you have like left aligned text, maybe the placement is off by just a couple of pixels, and that can be distracting for your audience. Next, any ideas of what this is? This picture. You can either raise your hand or put it in the chat window for me. A fan? Close. An airplane fan, also close. A wheel, a turbine, yeah, this is a jet engine. And this is an example of repetition. You see the different shapes and how they're repeated and the lines. I thought that was a really good example. When you use repetition in your presentation, that helps unify your whole design. And finally, proximity. Proximity is putting things together that have a relationship. Like, for example, in a menu, you know, the different categories. Oh, do we have a question, Aisha?
I believe so. Let me just see who it is. Cameron, do you have a question? Oh, maybe not. Looks like they may have lowered their hand. So you can continue.
Oh, okay. No worries if you do. So these are the big four elements or principles of design. And another good thing to do is to choose and limit your color palette. And I want to demo this really quick for you. This is called Adobe Color. You do need to have an Adobe account. But when you do this, Adobe will let you play with different colors on the screen. And you can choose different, what they call different harmonies. For example, if you want a monochromatic color palette, these are tints of the same color. So, and again, this will be available in the class when you receive it, and you can play with colors to your heart's content. So I know that adults like to learn by seeing examples, and I do too. There's an author and a designer. His name is Gar Reynolds, and he wrote a book called Presentation Zen. And these examples are from him. And so now I'd like to show you a before and after example and get your ideas on how to improve it. For one, what would you do to improve this slide? You can either raise your hand and speak, or you can put your ideas in the chat window. We'll just take a couple of minutes. Sean says, make the words more legible, enlarge the picture. Diane, improve the text. Now they're going by too fast. Changing the background, removing the bullets. Remove the bullets. Improve the clarity. Yeah, it's not really clear what we're getting at here, is it? Picture is too small. Okay. The white text is hard to see. Let's take a look at what Gar did to improve it. So see what a difference this makes? Right, you use contrast, and the black and white makes it very powerful. And you see that the attention now, I'm pointing at the screen, sorry. The attention is on the quote. It's not broken up into bullets. And you should also note the way that President Kennedy is looking. He's looking into the screen. That's something that people don't always notice, is if you have a subject in a picture of the direction that they're looking or pointing. And what this can do is lead your eye around that screen area. Very good suggestions. Thank you all. So let's take a look at another example. How would you fix this? White on light, blue doesn't work. Okay, highlighter, create larger. How would you design this differently? First statement should not be a bullet. Yeah, that's a good point. Too many words. Remember that you want to try to get in 3 seconds what your meaning is. Yet replace the clip art with an actual picture. Good point. Yeah, the title's kind of bleeding off the top, right? Better picture that would tell the story. The clip art is distracting. Yep, you all picked up on that. Let's see what Gar did. Now, even though you don't see the entire slide because it's horizontally oriented, this is a much, much better version because the picture supports the message, right? And you see how they used, or he used, repetition. 150,000 tons of plastic. The green, and you see the green of that green bottle. Yes, picture is worth 1,000 words, Jasmine. So one more. How would you improve this chart? Change the font. Okay. That's a little bit difficult to read, isn't it? Sean says to combine the data, bigger font, simpler design. Okay. Too many colors to throw it out. Well, yeah, that could be one option, right? Yeah, there's different colors. The bright colors are messing with my eyes. Yeah, you want to make it pleasant to read, right? Suzanne asked, do you have advice on determining copyright? I will touch on that briefly in a little bit. The logo's too big. Okay, so we've got lots of ideas here on how to make this. Is this better? You can see at a glance what the numbers mean. It's clear. You can read the font. The lady in the white coat is gone. We're not quite sure what she was doing there in the first place. So those are some examples for you. I'm going to skip over this one and go back to our regularly scheduled presentation. And we will talk about creating your design. We're halfway through here. And I'd like to introduce you to minimalist design. This is an example I did with a phone metaphor. It was for a faculty roundtable a couple of years ago. It's very simple. And the theme for minimalist design is that less is more. And the idea is that you only show people what the important content is. And you often see lots of white space. The space can be white or it can be another color. And you might recognize some of the companies that use this particular design approach. Big one is Apple and also Google. My friend and coworker Roxanne May calls this type of design the Google effect. And I think that's a good way to describe it. So some of the characteristics of this design are, as I started mentioning, it has a lot of negative space. It's flat. Elements are usually not three-dimensional. You might see a monochromatic palette, meaning it's all tints of one color. Photos and illustrations are used to convey meaning and emotion. And you usually see beautiful typography or text and contrast used for emphasis. Sorry. Here are some examples of minimal logo designs. And I see I missed the credit there for airplane. Also, I haven't mentioned anything about infographics. Infographics are basically collections of data visualizations. And this is an example that I did for our Delivering an Effective Training Session course. It was about how, as a teacher, you can save your voice when you're teaching with a mask on. And so this is an example of minimalist design. You see a lot of space. You see how the red kind of leads your eye through. And so I cleverly made this infographic and then forgot to give my students an opportunity to teach with a mask on. So I kind of shot myself in the foot on that one. But here is also another one that I did. This uses a monochromatic color palette for 508, making video 508 compliant. And finally, here is one that I wish I had designed, but I did not. It's for your kitchen, and it's converting volume measures. And Alexandra Glante made that, or Glant. And I also would like to mention that if you've heard the term universal design, it has many of the same characteristics of minimal design. It's a design approach so that things are accessible to everyone. It's not a checklist, it's more of a design approach, and there's more information at this particular URL. So you've chosen a design, this minimalist design, and the next step is how to apply it. And that you apply it by creating a design template for your story. So here we are. This is where you pull all of your pieces together. You create a color palette. We've done that. Create a template for your design. So your slides have a uniform look and feel. You have a color palette. Choose a background that's not too busy. Go think about our minimalist design examples and choose layouts that support your data, and then insert content based on your templates. So here's an example of, this was a template created by one of our professional graphic designers. Her name is Kelly Fike, for my course called Safety for Supervisors. You see how she used repetition and color here? So this is an example of a layout sketch using a dominant photo from minimalist design. And there's the actual slide. So now I'd like to take a minute and ask you to write one thing that you've learned so far that you could apply at work. Make it like an action item for yourself. And it can be more than one item if you like, but I'd like you to just take one thing that you've learned so far and write down when you're going to apply it. Harp, yay! Less is more. Adobe Color, that's really fun. Yes. Good. Simplify. How to be organized. All good. All very good ideas. So our next step, and time is moving right along. Our next step is we've got our design style. Now we need to look at the choices for showing our data. What kind of format are you going to present it in? Are you going to use, I'm all tangled up in my cord here, sorry. Are you going to use just text, a PowerPoint presentation, an Excel spreadsheet? Are you going to use an infographic? But I've been saying data visualization over and over, and that is essentially the representation of data in a graphical or a pictorial format. And here's some examples. You've probably all seen that particular map if you've been in the DC area. And it's a timeline and a bar chart. And this is an amazing tool that I'm going to show you very quickly. This was made by a couple of scientists and professors at the visualliteracy.org. And it will show you every single kind of data visualization that you can ever dream of. And granted, some of them, the quality isn't quite as good as others, but they make up for it in sheer volume. So again, you will get access to this URL as well. But that will give you some ideas on how you can visualize your data. And I just thought that was one of the coolest things ever. So now you're going to visualize your data. So you should have these items: your data analysis and your brief conclusions, your rough sketch of your story, and a list of the data visualizations you want to do. And someone had asked earlier, that was you, Jasmine, or about copyright-free images. Here are some sources that I use. Note that if you work in government, anything that you produce is public domain. And this collection here at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we have a creative resources division, and we have professional videographers and graphic designers. And this library is where you can access our pictures and videos. Two others that I use very consistently are pixabay.com and pexels.com. You are required to credit them. You can also pay for specific uses. And how many of you have heard of Canva? Say yes in the chat, or Canva is an online graphic design tool that offers all kinds of templates in it. So you can start here, you can make infographics, you can the whole 9 yards. Not all of it is free. There are some things that you pay for. If you do want to do things in teams, that costs extra. So that is Canva. And as I mentioned, data visualization itself is not my strong point. I'm very interested in storytelling and using stories for learning and graphics and communication and all that, but actually working with numbers to make data visualizations, I haven't done much of. I did see that Google has a free tool called Google Studio. If any of you would like to try that and let me know how it goes, I'd love to hear. And we did the color wheel already. And here's an example. I think I mentioned earlier, these little icons came from a site called thenounproject.com. It's a good place to get icons. You also have to credit. But here, I wanted to do 32.6 million just in text, the number of remote workers, and what I ended up settling on was adding a picture, because it didn't go with the rest of the presentation, basically. So here is a list of just 3. There's many, many more, but I limited it to 3. The number of common mistakes that you might make when you're visualizing your data. The first one is that your overall message or your call to action isn't clear. The audience doesn't know what you want them to do. Or the second is the change in your data isn't immediately apparent to your audience. They can't tell how it's different. And third, the type of data visualization you used is not the best choice to support your data. And I know that adult learners like to see examples, so do I. So now at long last, I'm going to show you an example of a data story. And as I mentioned, I work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service at the National Conservation Training Center, and my data story is different because it stars bald eagles. And if you attended my other presentation, you'll have seen some of these pictures before. It's in Shepherdstown. It is a very beautiful place right on the Potomac River. But there's an eagle nest that's there, and every year there's a pair of bald eagles that come back to have their family. And their nest is equipped with a webcam. And it was kind of funny, the first year that it was installed, there was so much interest that it crashed the entire Fish and Wildlife Service network. But that's another story from another earlier time. Now the Eagle Cam is hosted by an outside entity. And the example I'm going to share with you is from our social media team. And they have written about the eagles, and one of their posts went viral. And I'm going to show this to you really quickly, just a little bit of it. the poor eagle is getting snowed on and protecting the eggs. And you'll get the URL so you can watch at length if you like. But that was the post that went viral. And they recently did a presentation at our an all-employee meeting. And their message was, we need help. We need more active members. And the head of the team, her name is Melissa Gonzalez. She's very kind and she's got a background in marketing. And this is information from her about that viral post. And she gave some of her data visualizations to me to share with you today. The first one was a diagram. This one shows the two different audiences, internal and external, and what their different objectives are for those audiences. The second one is a timeline that shows the evolution of their team and milestones that they've had along the way. And finally, the last one is their analytics. These are the numbers that shows the number of followers, impressions, clicks, and engagement. And they also explained what those terms mean. So it was very clear to everyone. And they explained each role that each team member had in producing a post. And they ended their presentation with a call for new members. And I was so inspired that I joined up, by the way. So that's my example. And I'd like to ask real quickly if you have any experience telling data stories, and if you do, share them in the chat or raise your hand, please. So I'm not seeing anyone. I know we're running out of time. So finally, the last piece of the process is to tell your story. You may have a great story about your data. You might have a great presentation, but if you don't present it well, your message will be lost. And I teach a course called Delivering an Effective Training Session. These are some tips on how you can engage your audience, how to deliver your content, and how to communicate effectively, just at a glance. And that brings us to the end. You've done it. So now we're going to take a very quick look at what you've learned today. We walked through a process that you can use to communicate visually. You started with your target audience, remember that, about 100 years ago, and talked about a learner persona, and that you can focus on a learner persona as you're developing your presentation. We talked about finding your story and creating your design and a template, and using some of those online tools. How do you visualize your data? And finally, how do you deliver your message? So what was my main message to you today? Well, mainly I wanted to let you know that you can tell the story of your data easily yourself in 5 steps, and you can do the steps yourself. And I'd like you to contact me if you have any questions along the way. I think I skipped over my contact stuff. That's right. Woohoo! Congratulations, you're a visual communicator. This is where we would have ticker tape and bands and fanfare and things like that. So here is my contact information. I would be delighted if you contacted me if you have questions. And I know we just have a few minutes left, so I'd like to open it up for questions. And take a drink of water. Aisha, do you see anything? Oh, cool. Denise. Nice. Not far away. Can I explain CARP? CARP, that's the acronym I chose for 4 design principles: contrast, alignment, repetition, and proximity. You're welcome, everyone. And as I mentioned, Aisha will share this URL of this course with you. And if you discover any resources as you're trying to tell the story of your data, let me know.
The link to the presentation will be on the email invite that you all have, so you should already have access to it. If you don't and you need it from me, just let me know. It is also on the presentation and agendas page, which you can find here. I will drop it in the chat box.
Thank you.
So if you'll just need to find Diane's session on that list, and then you can click presentation and it'll take you to the link.
Thank you all for coming today. I really, really appreciate it. Enjoyed learning with you.
It looks like someone had a question. How difficult is it to create infographics? Infographics, sorry. I know you mentioned one of the sites offers it.
Yeah, it's not hard. It's just putting pieces of like separate data visualizations together. It's combining them essentially into one longer product. And if you'd like, I can step through one with you. We can meet because I don't have detailed specific information on that, but on Canva, they have all kinds of templates that you can use. Do I have resources to support making data 508 compliant? I do not. I would recommend that you go to section508.gov, the website that the government has for that. The main one is alternative text for your pictures. That's the first one that comes to the top of my head, but there are plenty of other things. I hope that helps a little. Thank you for your questioning.
While we're waiting for our final questions, I want to say thank you very much to our wonderful presenter, Diane, as well as to our ASL interpreters. Thank you both.
Yes, thank you.
As a reminder, we'll be sending out a post-session survey at the end of the forum on Thursday, and we would greatly appreciate your feedback. So we will stay on for a couple more minutes to take any final questions.
Sean
apologies. I think I may have sent one that, I see. Let me just double check.
We'll get it figured out, Sean.
Let's see. Here.
It should be a link that all you need is the link. There isn't a password or anything like that associated with it.
You should have access to this link. I believe it's the one that's linked when I sent that paragraph where it says agendas and presentations page. The individual registration pages will not be available, but the agenda and presentation page will be. This is the link to it. I just sent it again in the chat. Let's hope that works. Oh, I see. You don't need to click communicating visually because that will take you to the registration page. And since registration is closed, you don't need to access that. All you need to do is look at the table right next to it. If you go to the right side, you'll see the presentation, and then you'll see recording. You need to click presentation. Recording will be available within a few days.
Thank you very much, everyone. So Aisha, do you have another session after this one, or can we meet briefly?
Yes, yeah, we can.
Okay.
No, we don't have any more sessions